Are you full of ideas but can't seem to get your creative project started? In this conversation, Liz Whitmere shares her journey from performer to director, producer, writer, discussing the challenges and triumphs she faced along the way. She emphasizes the importance of authentic representation of women in film, particularly flawed and complex characters. She reflects on her creative process, the inspiration behind her short film Cold, and the collaborative nature of directing. She also touches on the differences between directing for television and directing for film, talks about her inspirations and how she overcomes writer's block. Liz shares her experience in the film industry, discussing the challenges of accessibility on set, common mistakes made by new filmmakers, and the importance of planning for post-production. Liz also delves into her recent work in documentary filmmaking and her passion for teaching digital storytelling. If you're feeling paralyzed by the process of finishing a project, or you have a great idea and don't know where to start, this episode is for you. But before we get into it, if you could hit the subscribe button, I would appreciate it so much, and it doesn't cost you a damn thing.
Alrighty, beautiful. Well, I like to start at the beginning, and I want to know how you got into directing.
Oh, okay. Well, the beginning is a long time ago. So I started as a performer
Yes.
and in theater when I was 9. I started doing like summer stock Shakespeare stuff. And then when I was 16 was my first day on a set that was recording media, which was for like an industrial video for the Massachusetts Department of Health. I lived in Massachusetts at the time, and it was a bad production, but I remember being so like, this is the thing. This is where the goods are. This is the magic. And I couldn't stop watching the monitor. And I stayed like 4 hours past my wrap to just watch the camera team. And I really wish someone had, when I was 16, had taken me aside and been like, hey, you like this part, right? Wouldn't it
Mm-hmm.
be cool to be behind the camera and be like in charge of some part of the process? Sadly, nobody did that. So I mean, I also love acting. It's my first love was always performance. So I continued my performing career until I had kids, and some career stuff goes away when you have kids. It can. I had been back and forth to LA, and all of a sudden I wasn't going to LA anymore. Um, and then I started producing because I got mad. So I was upset that I didn't have the opportunities that I wanted, and I wasn't seeing the things on screen that I wanted to be seeing. So I started producing to see those things and to get to perform those things, and then produced, and then finally gathered the courage to start writing and directing my own stuff. And then again, had that feeling of like, oh, this is where the goods are. I love it so much. And that's where I've been ever since. It gives me much more sense of like agency and active participation in the process.
Absolutely amazing. And what you said you were mad at not seeing the parts that you wanted to play and the things you wanted to do on screen. What are some of
Yeah.
those things that you wanted to see more of?
Um, well, when I was in my early 20s, I fit very conveniently into like the hot mean girl box. Like I was tall, I was thin, I was conventionally attractive. My voice was low, so I had authority. And so I played a lot of like the other woman or like the mean secretary kind of stuff. And it felt very two dimensional. And my time in Los Angeles left me with this feeling of like the rule in the business seems to be above all else, be hot.
Mm.
That's the first rule of Hollywood is be attractive. And then anything beyond that, like, is a distant second. I'm talking about like mainstream TV and film. I'm not talking about independent film. So the characters that I wanted to see and I wasn't seeing were flawed women, difficult women, confused or misfiring women. And I've always had this like love of Hedda Gabler as a character. I read Hedda Gabler in high school and was immediately like, oh, that's interesting because she's awful. She's a terrible person. And there's a whole play named after her. What a wonderful thing. So it was, women who stick their elbows out and make some noise and take up space are my favorite kind. And I want to see more of them.
Amazing. Yeah. In your bio, you said you wanted to do more difficult in quotation
Yeah.
women. What do you mean by difficult?
Well, I mean, in society generally, it's very easy for women to get labeled as difficult. And usually the behavior that gets you labeled difficult is standing up for yourself or being inconvenient in some way, not just kind of going with the flow. So that's what I mean by the difficult women. Um, and it's also women who aren't afraid to say when they don't like something or advocate for their needs. All of that stuff that gets labeled assertive or leadership material when a dude does it. And then when
Yeah,
a woman does that stuff, not always, but sometimes it can get, you know, a different label gets put on that.
absolutely. 100%. And when you started directing, did you took a course to start, or did you just jump right into it?
I just jumped in. I did a little
Amazing.
bit of kind of poking around for like how to direct a movie, but I've been on set a lot.
Fair,
I had spent a
fair.
lot of time on sets, so I had an approximate idea that somebody's supposed to say action, somebody's supposed to say cut. And I also, the first thing that I wrote and directed was very much a like an image. I was at Lake Huron with my kids. We were camping. We were in the lake, and being in the water, like I couldn't shake the picture out of my head. So directing that first film, it's called Up to Here, was very image driven. It was very like, I have to go back there and make something. I was very lucky that a bunch of friends agreed to come back to Lake Huron with me and stand in the lake for like 2 days while we shot a movie. Um, so it was, I don't want to say it was easy. It was a lot of work, but it wasn't, at no point did I feel like, oh no, what do I do next? Because I had a clear image in my head of what I wanted the thing to be. And it was just mine. It was me, a DP, and one of our actors was the boom operator. So that was the whole crew. I didn't have to lead a huge team of people or like fight for my vision. It was just kind of a fun weekend. It was a pretty good introduction to directing, I gotta say.
Amazing. And you've done 5 short films so far, or you've done many, just 5 on IMDb?
Yes. Five. I think there's another one that's not yet on IMDb that I directed in the fall.
And that'd be
So
Cold.
six. Yeah. No, Cold is on IMDb, but there's another one
Okay.
that has a working title, No Straight Lines to Heaven, that we shot in the fall that we're just finishing up post now.
Okay. Nice. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And since I brought up Cold, we'll talk about Cold.
Yeah. Let's talk
It's
about Cold.
right. What was the inspiration for the film Cold?
uh, Geez, well, talk about a difficult woman. Um, for Cold, there was a period of time in, I'm going to say February 2023, where I was physically freezing for about 2 weeks. I couldn't get warm. And I was in like a really bad place mood wise. Like I was very sad and depressed. I felt physically weak. I was freezing cold. And at kind of the nadir of that curve, like the bottommost point, I remember sitting on my bed and thinking, oh my God, what if I'm dead? What if this is what it feels like to be dead? And I just wasn't paying attention and it just happened. And here I am. And then, sat in that feeling for a minute, and all of us, and my like little creative monkey back here went like, wait, what if you're dead? What would happen next? What's the next thing if you're dead but you're walking around? And then like I don't know, I don't want to get too like woo woo, but it felt like a gift or a ladder or something. It got me out of the hole, because then there was a story. Now I can get this feeling out of me and into the world, and maybe somebody else feels this way too sometimes, which was kind of a fun process, because as soon as I started pitching it around to colleagues that I respected and people that I wanted to invite in on the project, in like a paragraph, I had this little like 4 sentence pitch, and people responded to it and resonated with it, even in the 4 sentence version, which lit a fire in me to continue the process. And that one was a huge amount of work. It was a really challenging thing to put together, and it was entirely independent. We weren't funded, so it was an interesting ride. And I think it probably saved my life. Like, it was, the process of making that movie was very therapeutic.
Amazing. I love that. For the shorts that you've created, have you, what's the, let me start again.
That's okay.
When directing, there's a lot of pivots that you have to make as a director as you go through. Do you remember, or can you tell me about a time where you had to make a major pivot?
Yes. um, so there's a sequence in Cold where our dead lady goes to get a manicure to try to feel better. And that required changing her nails. So we had, as part of our like costume department and makeup department, we had press on nails for her to indicate. So we had a visible change as opposed to just nail polish. And didn't realize that the adhesive for those press on nails was not going to release easily. It was like real nail glue. It wasn't like the ones that you buy at the drugstore that have a little strip of tape on them and they pop off easily. These ones were like firmly attached. And we were shooting out of order. So in order to shoot the script as written, we needed to be able to deprocess from the manicure. We needed to take the nails off to shoot the next scene that was scheduled. And they weren't coming off. And I didn't want to hurt Melanie. Like, she was, I don't want to actually damage her nails or anything like that. So as there was just this a lot of whispered conversations and like, oh my God, the nails aren't coming off. So I went downstairs in the house we were shooting in and rewrote the script. Like, I had to rewrite 4 scenes to make the thing work because we didn't have the location past that day. We didn't have the resources past that day. So it had to happen on those 2 days of shooting in the house. And we got it done. And it was just one of those moments where you go into the problem solving tunnel. I don't like to work in a way, I don't like yelling at people. And I don't think anyone deserves to be yelled at ever. We're all working towards the same common goal. And it's just a waste of my energy. It makes other people feel bad. I don't do it. I've been on sets where people yell. They're not happy sets. I don't want to run that kind of set. So we just, oh, there's a problem. All right, let's solve it. Here we go. Pivot, pivot, pivot. And off we go down a different road. And it worked out, I think.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a lot of rewriting for a short film. I'm just imagining the panic.
It was very, man, I feel like I get more bent out of shape over minor inconveniences in my life. Like, ow, I stubbed my toe. I'll be like, oh, that really hurt. But when I'm in work mode and something big happens, it's like my executive brain takes over and it's like, okay, here's what we're going to do, everyone. It's going to be fine.
Right?
Just keep breathing.
Absolutely. What to you, in your opinion, what makes a good director?
I think it's someone who's having fun. Because if you're not having fun, then what are you doing? Like, why do this job if it's not fun? And I would say the best directors that I've worked with as a performer have had some contact with performance themselves, so they have some common language with performers. And they're open to good ideas from pretty much anybody. I like that kind of director, and I aspire to be that kind of director. I like to surround myself with people who are really, really good at their jobs, like better than I could ever be at their jobs, so that I can turn to them and say, what do we do? What do you think? How do we solve this? How do we make this picture better? How do we feed the scene better? And I've been lucky that I've gotten to work with a lot of people who are really, really good at what they do. So it makes me look good, which is nice. Just a little bonus.
Absolutely. So collaborative director, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's a team
Nice.
sport. I've also worked with directors who are very focused on one individual vision and a very focused idea of who should hold power. And I don't love that mode. It works for some people. It doesn't, it's not the way I like to work. I prefer to work with my people rather than like as the boss of my people.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes a difference. You the atmosphere on set,
Yeah.
you can feel it.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've also, so not only have you done the short films, but you've also directed television as well. Is there
Mhm.
different things that happen behind the camera when you're shooting for drama versus comedy?
Uh, yes. Yeah. Well, there's a lot that's different when you're shooting series versus film. Um, because on a series, like the series that I worked on was not my series. I didn't write it. So I was more of a guest in someone else's house than the main creative driver for the project. For film, it's more of like an auteur. Certain kinds of film are more like an auteur experience. Whereas TV, it's very much like just come in and do the job and get out, and then you can go home. So it's a lot of checking against the tone that has been set for the show and making sure that what you're doing matches what's been shot previously and is consistent with the characters, and relying on the actors to know who their characters are and all of that stuff. So it's not so much a divide between comedy drama because it's always in both of those genres, and in horror too, the thing that makes the scene relatable or compelling is that it's grounded in something honest. So whether it's comedy, comedy has to be grounded somewhere too. Otherwise, it's just like just like drama. And horror is very similar to comedy in that it's building tension then breaking it, building tension then breaking it. So the payoff mechanism is very similar between those two genres. So I would say my process always looks like, where's the grounding? What do you want, and why do you want it, and how are you going to get it? And that's a universal starting place for all of that stuff.
Amazing. And as a director, who are some of your biggest inspirations?
Oh boy. Um, I really like Yorgos Lanthimos. I think he's a big weirdo. I really like Charlie Kaufman. Uh, her name is just falling out of my head. She directed Barbie. She's not famous at all. What's her
Oh
name? Oh my
yeah.
God. You know who I'm talking about.
Yes, Greta Gerwig.
Ah, yes, thank you. Greta. That's embarrassing. Her name should always
No,
be in
as
my
soon as
head.
you said I forget it, I was like, and now it's out of mind.
Of course. It's like when someone asks me what my favorite movie is, all of a sudden I'm like, I've never seen a movie. I
I
don't know what a
know,
movie is.
right?
I
Like
can't
I
think of
can't
any
think
of
of a
them.
single movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep,
So yeah,
can
those would
relate.
be probably my top three. I like the weirdness. I'm a big fan of what ifing the real world impact of a truly outlandish situation. So, and I feel like all three of those directors are pretty locked in that regard. Or if I'm trying to think of an outlandish situation off the top of my head, and I'm coming up dry because it's that on the spot thing again. Um, but like the In Cold, for example, it wasn't about, oh my God, this person's dead. Wow, what do we do? It was just a matter of course. This is just what's happening. And then seeing what the fallout is in that way is very compelling to me from a storytelling standpoint.
Yes, and Cold is going to be live soon for everyone to
Yes,
see.
very soon.
Yes,
That's correct. And I don't know what your release plan is or how you dole out
in a
your
couple of
episodes.
weeks. Is it coming soon?
Okay. Yeah, really soon.
Ooh.
And we're going to set up a private virtual screening for people so people can register for that before it goes live out in the world.
Oh,
So as soon as I have a
amazing.
link for that, I will send it to you.
Okay, great. Yeah, let me know because then I'll release this before so people can
That would be
hear about
amazing.
it and sign up and watch
Yeah,
and do a
we're going to do like a Q&A thing with some of the team who made the movie, and I'm trying to cut a blooper reel, which is interesting for a body horror to see what's there.
That's hilarious. That's a lot of
Yeah,
fun. That's how long did it take
it's
you to
pretty good.
film the short film? How many days of on set?
We shot for 3 days.
Okay, nice.
So we had two days in the house, and then one day that was a doctor's office and nail salon. And it was, yeah, it was a sprint. It was a real intense period of time, as it always is when you're making something. But yeah.
Yes, and you're looking to make it a feature film as well?
Yes, I've been developing the script into a feature that's turning into this like Thelma and Louise meets Fight Club kind of a thing.
Amazing.
Like still playing with what's real, what's not, who's real, who's not. In Cold, it's not like, is she really dead? Can anybody else tell that she's really dead? How crazy are people around her? And I'm continuing to play with that notion.
I love. Awesome.
Yeah,
That's so cool. Very
it's gonna be fun.
exciting. So
Thanks.
yeah, we'll let everybody know when things are happening. That's
Yeah, for
awesome.
sure.
Have you ever had a time where you're working with, say, the network or um, heads above, and you've had to pivot because of their um, vision or budget or anything of that matter?
Yes. Yeah. That's, I don't want to tell too many stories out of school because I don't want to torpedo myself.
Fair.
There's certainly been times where it's an exercise in, and I talk about, sorry, let me rewind. I do
Mhm.
a lot of mentorship and teaching as well as directing.
Yes.
And when I'm like teaching how to make media, a lot of it has to do with getting your ethical compass pointed in the direction where you want it pointed. So making a deal with yourself. These are my red lines. These are the things I won't do. Here's what I aspire to. Setting your standards. And then also having meetings with yourself as I think of it as like sitting across the table from my ego.
Mm.
And so when something stings, when someone tells me something that they don't like that I've done, or like, actually, the tone is this, actually, it's not going to match up with the kinds of things that you thought it was going to match up with, then I have this little meeting with my ego, and it's like, it's not yours. You have to let go and just do your job. Because I think we all, as artists, we get passionate and attached and invested. And it's pretty easy for that passionate investment to turn into this like grasping ownership thing where, my precious, nobody else is allowed to touch it, it's mine. But when you're working with a team and you're not the creative lead, that's not available. You can't do that. It's not functional and you won't be invited back. So it requires being passionately invested and separate from your own Smeagol who wants to like take the thing and run. And that's been it's a learnable skill, and it can be painful to learn that skill because, egos get bruised, right? Everybody wants to think that they're like the best person or the best at, someone's going to watch the cut and be like, oh, this is amazing. So when those notes don't come back, it's like, oh God, this hurts. So yeah, I think
Absolutely.
I stayed vague enough to not throw myself under any buses.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Okay, good,
And
good.
going from watching things on set and seeing how things are done and then to actually directing, is there anything that surprised you about the directing process?
I would say it. The biggest surprise to me is that this is maybe going to make me sound terrible. The biggest surprise to me was that people were saying yes to working with me. People were willing to trust me to direct a thing, which is terrifying because there's a lot of pressure there, right? If people just say no, then you're like, well, I could have been a contender. Fine. But when people start actually saying yes, that can be really scary and intimidating. So I was surprised at how much acting is involved in the job of directing. Because if I show up at work scared, and broadcasting that I'm scared, then I lose the respect of several departments within about 4 minutes of being at work.
Mm.
So a big part of it is owning the floor in a way, in a generous way, not in a like dictatorial way. But yeah, I'd say that was the first biggest surprise, was people actually said yes to that very first film, and then again to Cold, and then all the other shorts where I'm like, hey, do you want to do something weird and creative with me? And people say yes, and I'm like, oh God, okay, yes, let's go. And the other piece was how much acting is involved, and I've also produced quite a bit, and how much I have kids, and how much parenting skills translate to producing and directing. Like the kind of I often have to mediate between my kids when they disagree about something, and those skills translate. When I have two departments that don't want to go in the same direction, there's a lot of like, okay, you're feeling really frustrated. I'm also feeling frustrated. Let's figure out how we can solve a problem together. And it, just because people are little doesn't mean they stop having those needs to feel heard when they grow up and at
Yeah,
work and, all of that stuff.
absolutely. That's awesome. Do you like producing or directing more?
Oh, directing by a mile, by
Right.
1,000 miles. Producing, I've met some producers who love producing, and it's like, ooh, are you okay? Like, what do you get out of this process?
Yeah, I feel the same way about producing and finding producers that love it. I'm like, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Why?
It's like, are you,
You
what?
like paperwork?
Ooh, is everything okay at home? Like, do we need to
Yeah.
talk?
You know what? You could do anything. You could do anything else.
Yeah, exactly. I feel very much the same way. But by the same token, when I'm working with a producer who isn't me, obviously, if I'm working with a producer, it's not me. Um, there's a control thing that slips too. So when someone does all the crummy producing work, I swear I'm not a control freak. It is most comfortable for me to produce and direct, just because then I don't have to explain choices to
Yeah.
anyone. So I don't mind explaining choices, but I get very focused and I move really fast when I've got a direction and I'm moving in it. And it just costs time to explain those choices. So if my producer brain and my director brain agree with each other, and I have the resources to do the thing that I want to do, then I just go and do the thing really fast. Like, we just get it done, rather than, there's nothing that like hurts me more than I'm like, well, let's talk about the pros and cons of this versus, or we could do this other thing. And what about, I'm like, no, you don't understand. I have momentum right now. We're going this way. So that's, yeah. I don't know. I feel like I went off on a tangent there on you.
Well, I
Sorry.
can 100% relate. 100% relate. I'm like, just say yes, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. And do you still work as an actor as well, or are you just focusing on directing now?
When they let me, I work as an actor. Like when I still would love to be, but I will say that I've found more fulfillment in being
Mm,
behind the camera. So acting is nice work if I can get it. I'm not hanging my hat on it anymore. It used to be the only thing I wanted to do, and now I feel like I have a broader range of things that fill my cup. So it's actually kind of nice because it means I'm much more relaxed about performance, because it's not the only thing.
yeah,
It's
it's not
one
a
of,
be all end all.
exactly. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's a good feeling. And yeah, it takes
It
time to
is.
get to that place too.
It does. Yeah. Well, and this is why my cat's here. He wants to be
I
part of the
thought I
interview.
had a cat for a second. I was like, what? It's like dreams are coming
Surprise! You're
true.
the cat. That's right. That's very funny. Yeah.
How do you overcome writer's block when you get it? Or do you, well, a lot of
Oof.
people claim they don't get writer's block. Do you get writer's block?
Oh Lord, yes. Absolutely. That's why I mean, we finished Cold the Short in 2023. We're now 2025, and the feature's not yet fully written. Like the skeleton is there, but it's not finished. Part of that has to do with current events having a bit of a like paralyzing effect. It's been wild in the world, and I find it really hard to look away, to like, and to focus. So the past several months have been kind of a wide-eyed, horrified gasp, just continuously.
Yeah, I was gonna say just a never-ending gasp. I'm like,
yeah. Well, and especially this past like 10 days has been, holy moly, what on earth?
Absolutely nuts. I know. When I ask people, like, how are you? I'm like, or when people ask me, how are you? I'm like, no complaints other than like the usual, like the ones everybody has.
Well, yeah, the world.
Yeah. Other than the state of the world, I'm fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. It's great. No complaints whatsoever.
Right? Oh, that's so funny. Man.
So yeah, writer's block. I don't really know how to. A deadline helps. If someone tells me something's due, that often like flips the switch for me. I think it's adrenaline related, probably. But also dreading one task makes me very productive about whatever the other task is. Yes. So I've seen this kind of in joke format where like if you have 3 projects going at all times, you can procrastinate on the other 2 by working on the third.
That's so
and then it satisfies the productivity thing. You get some dopamine from that, but you also get to satisfy the I don't want to do that other thing impulse. I don't know. I haven't fully nailed that particular juggling act yet, but it's on my list.
That's amazing. That's a good idea because it's usually I'm like my kitchen's really clean because I really don't want to do this computer work that I've been avoiding.
Yes. Exactly. But by the same token, right? It's kind of, I find the external deadline thing is kind of a sorry, there's cat hair flying. He keeps shaking his head and there's cat hair flying through the air now. You know how if you have guests coming over, suddenly the urge to clean is like very immediate and,
yes,
you know, focused, even when you're like, oh, I'm tired. Nope, gotta go. They're going to be here in 2 hours. Same thing. I got to clean up my writing. If someone's going to read it, then I read it in a different way than if it's just for me.
Oh, there. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I need someone to just tell me that they're coming over and then not come over. Just every 2 weeks.
That is the ideal scenario. The perfect friendship mechanic is exactly. I'm going to be there in 45 minutes.
Just kidding.
Yeah, kidding. Like,
it's excellent.
Amazing.
Have you ever had an embarrassing moment on set?
Yes. God, all of them. Every moment is embarrassing on set. It's terrible. I routinely use the wrong words for whatever. I'm not a technical camera savvy person, so I'm like, use the thing that makes the part that's over. Can you just make it soft in the part that's not this fuzzy? Make it, and then whoever, my DP is like, yes, Liz, we can, fine. And as a performer, I was I was working on a film shortly after having had my first kid, and at risk of sharing too much information, I had oversupply, so I was like making way too much milk, and on set my pump broke, the thing that was keeping me free from pain, because when you have oversupply it can hurt a lot. So I was in between anytime I was able to run away, I was in the bathroom hand expressing like a cow, like just trying to make it through the day, and then coming back with like multiple pads in my bra so I wouldn't leak. And just, it's really one of the things that I try to make happen. It's hard to do, but this is part of that ethical compass thing. One of the pillars that I try to work with around within, one of the pillars of the way I like to work is accessible sets. So I want people who work with me to feel like they can do the job, even if they have little kids at home, or even if they have a mobility challenge, or even if they have a support need. And then that accessibility means that I have a more diverse range of people available to work with. And it means that nobody's like hand expressing in the bathroom to try to make it through the day, because we've got it sorted. We've got it figured out.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, there's so many stories you hear of on-set experiences of people having to make it work for the sake of the day on set.
Oh yeah. Well, and that cooperation is great. Like everyone in the trenches together, we're just going to get through it and make the thing happen. Everyone working hard. And I'm not discounting any of that work ever. And it's possible to set up an environment that doesn't require that people work themselves to death or past the red line of like getting sick after, that kind of stuff. Like it's possible to run a healthy set. And I would love to see kind of a sea change in the industry towards that goal.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And you mentor and have students as well. Are there some common mistakes that you see that they make when you're mentoring?
Whenever I walk people through a budget and explain all the things that need to happen, there's usually a pretty horrified look on their face. It's very like, why all these things? When I get to the insurance and corporate overhead and all of like that section, the invisible line items, you don't see them on the screen, but they're still necessary for the project to move forward. That gets really disappointing for people. And I would say people don't assign enough time or budget for post-production. I've certainly been guilty of this, and a lot of the stuff that I teach is based on mistakes that I've made. So I'm trying to be the mentor for other people that I wish I had had myself, because I very much had to figure it out on my own. I didn't have a mentor to turn to for a lot of the work that I have done. So I try to hammer it into people that you gotta leave time for post. You gotta plan for marketing before you start shooting. Like all of these things that seem like they should happen after, they're actually stuff that you're thinking about while you're writing the script. So bring a whole bunch of that after work way forward in the process and just let it live here and start planning. Because then you have a strategy. You're not reactive, you're proactive. So yeah, I think that budgeting and planning, and copyright law.
Small details.
Tiny detail. What do you mean I can't use the Dunkin' Donuts sign in my movie? I'm like, well, you can't. I'm so sorry. It's not going to happen. But it's right there. Yeah, I know it's right there. You can't shoot it. You're going to have to do something.
Yeah, that's a whole other, that's so much. I went to a panel. They were talking about copywriting and copywriting music, and how difficult it is to get music, the rights to it, and chasing down if the musician or the artist has passed, chasing down their family for the rights and whatnot. I'm like, holy, I wouldn't even consider that part of my job. I'm like, what, we have to do what today?
It's hard. That whole thing that's a full-time job.
Yeah.
The like music rights acquisition stuff can be really all-consuming.
Yeah. It's tricky. There's so many working parts to making a film or a short or a series, whatever, that if you get it done, even if it's crap, I'm like, you did the thing, because
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's so much work.
it's
So much.
enormous work, and uh, it would be, I feel like I'm often tempted to like hide in my basement and make movies with like puppets or something so that I won't have to work with people, because people introduce wild card factors into the process. They're not, people aren't robots. They don't just do the thing and then stop doing the thing when they're done. Um, but it's so rewarding because you end up with a microcosm of like family dynamic in an interesting way when you've got your team, and it can be bumpy and up and down, but it's a very intense kind of bonding experience. And then you have a thing at the end that you can point to. We made that together,
Mm.
which is, I find, really gratifying. I love the challenge. I love pointing to a big goal and then like going for it. I love the hard work. Um, and I've met a lot of people who are full of like really good ideas, and then they just don't finish the process, like, or even start the process. They have lots of reasons why they can't start, and it's unfortunate because you can't copyright an idea. You can only copyright the finished product, and you'll never develop the skills that you feel like you're missing unless you jump off the cliff and try to figure it out before you hit the pavement. Like you have to apply, like, create some pressure for yourself so that it forces the growth, and growth is really uncomfortable. So it's, I love that I learn every time I make something, and I wish I could like inject bravery into the people who feel too scared to start. I want them to like just go. And
Yeah,
then, as you
absolutely.
say, maybe it's crap. Maybe it's really terrible, and that's okay because you did the process of finishing something. And now you can do the next thing and apply what you learned.
100%. Absolutely. If there was anything that you could tell your younger self when you were starting out, is there anything that you would tell your younger self?
A lot of things. Uh, I would, I think I probably would have told my 16-year-old self to start directing like right now, and just get, make some space, fight your way into the room and do your own thing. Because I feel like I spent a lot of time trying to be what someone else wanted me to be rather than building the thing that I wanted that was satisfying to me. And that's a shame because that was a lot of time that I could have spent doing more weird movies about weird stuff. And so now I just have to make up for that time. So I think that would be the like, do the thing. I love meeting filmmakers who are like in their early 20s and they're just like doing it. They're just going for it, swinging big, making questionable choices. Oh, so many, but doing it. And it's both inspiring and I'm also like, oh, I didn't do that. I wish I did.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I wanted to talk about
sure.
your building courses as well.
Yeah.
Bop, 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 ba, da, bop. Is that the only thing that I'm missing? Yes, yes. And we talked about. Oh, did you wanted to talk about we talked about Cold being released. Did you want to mention your mixed state productions on YouTube, or should I just include that in the caption of like
I
where
think
to find
if
it?
that can just live in the caption, that would be fine. So
Yeah.
I spent last year as a field producer for TVO, producing short documentary segments for The Agenda with Steve Paikin. And I've collected all of the segments. I produced 16 segments for them over the course of 10 months. Um, so those all live on the Mixtape Productions YouTube channel. If people want to see little portraits of like a cobbler or a sculpture forest or mentorship pairs in metalworking. I had a lot of creative freedom in that job, so I got to like pitch stories that I wanted to shoot. Sometimes they'd say yes and let me go shoot them. So that was pretty delightful. I really enjoyed that process.
Amazing. That's so
Yeah.
cool. That's so unique.
It was very much a like trial by fire for documentary filmmaking, because that was
Mm.
not, I've always been in scripted. So it was very much a like, oh, and now you're doing this thing. Whoa, talk about leaping off the cliff and figuring it out on the way down.
Yeah, because you don't exactly have the shot list, or an exact, the shot
No.
list would look different.
Yeah, you have like a rough idea. Like, I know I need to establish place and I know I need to see the subject that I'm talking to and I need some B-roll, but it's very much like it's the opposite of scripted. Scripted, you make a plan and shoot to the plan if you can. And documentary, you make a plan, but you're also on a scavenger hunt for good stuff. And the story
Mm.
isn't really present till you're done the interview. So it was a wild learning curve, very steep.
Oh, interesting. I like the way you put that. It
Yeah.
is, it would be, yeah, very flipped of putting all the pieces together in post.
Yeah, well, like you can outline kind of, especially if you've
Yeah.
pre-interviewed your people. And I wasn't doing like investigative journalism. I wasn't chasing breaking news or anything like that. It was very calm as a current affairs job goes. But it was, yeah, it was very much a treasure hunt, and there would be opportunities that would pop up, or a subject would say, "Hey, do you want to come watch me do this visually interesting thing?" And I'd be like, "Yes, absolutely." We go shoot it, and then I'm like, well, now I need to figure out how to work it into the segment. How do we do that? Because now I have this like weird piece of the puzzle that doesn't quite mesh. So it was a really good learning opportunity, and I like to think that I got a lot better at my job as time went on. Just going through the crucible over and over and over again.
As one does.
Yeah, yeah,
It's the best way to learn. I
exactly.
was talking with someone not long ago that it doesn't matter like how many books you read, or
Mm-hmm.
classes you take, or YouTube videos that you watch that are the like all the mistakes I made as a director, you're still gonna make mistakes and learn on the job.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm always been like a learn by doing person, so it was kind of ideal.
Hmm.
And I love problem solving and I love learning. Like, I love being on that vertical curve. It's stressful. My blood pressure goes up. I get real sweaty, but it's very like invigorating to not know and then acquire the knowledge. I've painted myself into a corner because of that trait, because there was a period of time where I thought I loved producing, but it turns out what I loved was learning how the machine works. So then once I had a pretty good grasp on how the machine worked, I was like, oh, oh, I don't I don't think I really want to do this anymore. This is I figured it out. Puzzle's over, guys. Can somebody else please take this from me? Then, so it's gotten me into hot water a couple of times.
Fair enough. And what do you think the key is to getting a project from start to finish?
Oh, um, I think it's like a kind of insanity has to come over you, because there's so many reasons not to do it. Always, for any
Other than
storytelling,
money
media making,
aside.
so much effort. Money's nice, but if you're not getting, like, especially for the DIY projects where you're not getting paid for the like purely creative expression things, if there's money involved, that's easy. I've got a paycheck coming, then I'm just going to go to work and do my job. There's no issue of motivation. But
Hmm.
if it's self-started, that's when the gremlins come up. They're like, "What are you doing? Why would you waste your time on this? What is, who, nobody wants to see this. Why would somebody want to watch a thing that you made?" All of those terrible little critics in the back of our heads. And I think particularly for women in the world and in media specifically, before we can start telling stories that are interesting and that matter and that are, you know, weird and fulfilling, first we have to like dig up and out of all of this social conditioning about being quiet and nice and cooperative. So it can feel like making a big mess on purpose to even get started, which is I think part of why it took me so long to start driving my own projects forward, because it felt like, well, I don't want to, I wouldn't want to be any trouble. I don't want to get in the way. And now, I have released that. Thank God. That's done. It's much more comfortable to not feel that way. But
Yes,
it takes time. It takes quite a bit of time.
absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. And you're building courses for creators. Tell me about the courses that you're
Yeah.
building.
So I spent last fall at the Toronto Reference Library teaching digital storytelling. I was their digital innovator in residence for 8 weeks. And the process of teaching what I do, so I did seminars on like how to take a scripted series from idea to completion, or how to make a documentary project from, again, that full circle that you're talking about, like getting it from start to all the way to finish, forced me to map out what I do. And it was really gratifying because it's easy as a solo artist to forget that what you know isn't common knowledge for everyone.
Yeah.
So it was kind of neat it was like a forced remembering. I had to remind myself that, like, oh, I have I have skills. I know a thing that is useful to someone else. And I would kind of like pour my brain out on the table and let everybody go through what I brought with me, like a rummage sale. And people were finding stuff that was useful to them in the body of knowledge that I was able to present in the time that I had. And that was wonderful. And I was surprised at how many different applications digital storytelling, project management, and kind of the creative application had. Because there were people who had projects that were technically digital storytelling, but they were like a journal with illustrations that was a scroll experience. So like a website where you scroll down 20 or 30 times to get through the whole story, kind of like Webtoon, where you go through an episode by scrolling vertically. There were people who wanted to make like a YouTube show about engines, which is so far removed from anything that I've ever done. But there was stuff in setting up your shoot and organizing your people and building a compelling story into an informational video that was useful to those folks. So it was really gratifying. So what I want to do is kind of like pull the curtain back for people who don't have a lot of contact with filmmaking and let them know how it's possible. Because a lot of people stop because they don't know how to start. So giving people keys to like, here's how you start the engine. Here's step 1. Let's do step 1 together. Here's step 2. Let's do step 2 together. Just to get the wheels turning. When I was just a performer, I thought producers had a magic wand. They had some kind of big power that I was unknowable and mysterious. And then I started producing, and the magic wand is just a very long to-do list and a little bit of people management and delegating sometimes. And it was such a revelation to me that I want to like pass that on. Be like, no, you can do this too. Come on, it's fun. It's weird and hard and it's fun. Come on, let's go. So those are it's kind of like filmmaking for non-filmmakers. I don't think I know any secrets that my peers don't know. The other people that I work with and around who are making short films and series, they know this stuff. It's pretty foundational stuff. The audience that I'm hoping to reach is people who want to have their first contact with media making, or even like there's storytelling involved in building a social media channel for an organization. There's like the story of the brand, and then there's the story inside each reel, and all of that stuff I find really compelling and interesting. So that's the pitch for the courses.
Amazing.
So if people want information about that, they can sign up for the newsletter at lizwhitmere.com.
Excellent. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you wanted to dive into or talk about or talk more about that I didn't mention?
No, you've been very thorough. You did
Excellent.
a really lovely job. And it's
Thank
delightful
you.
to see you again. Last time I saw you was at the TL Webfest Awards at the red carpet.
Mm-hmm.
And you were doing such a great job.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
so
and
welcome.
I'm
Of
thoroughly
course.
enjoying it. My final question is to you, or my final question to you is, if you could give this chapter in your life, or somebody asked me in life or career, so you can pick which one. If you could give this chapter of your life or career a title, what would you title it?
Ooh, am I allowed to swear on your
Mm-hmm.
podcast?
100%.
I would I would probably title it Fuck It.
Yes.
That would
Yes.
be because I'm out of time. Like I'm out of time and patience for waiting for permission. So it's very not that I'm like taking over the world or anything. The stuff I'm doing is on the scheme of things, in the scheme of things, tiny, but it's large for me. So,
Yes.
and it requires the same kind of to break the inertia of being stuck requires a huge amount of energy to get started, even. And it's real fuck it energy that's moving me forward at this point.
Yes. I love it. I love it. That's awesome. I love it. That's so perfect. And yeah, it's not a big in the grand scheme of things, not big, but it's your whole world. Like it's because it's your life. Like it is big.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I don't have OCD, but I think about the ending of As Good as It Gets when Jack Nicholson's character decides to step onto the pattern that he can't handle. And that gesture is as big an act of bravery as like leaping onto a grenade. It's a big deal. So I have a lot of respect for people who fear something and kind of move through it rather
Mm,
than letting it shut down the process.
absolutely. Amazing. Well, I look forward to seeing the feature size of Cold. I watched the short,
Wonderful.
and for those watching, go check out the short when it's up. We'll leave a link down below for it. And I'm so
Awesome.
excited to see what else you do with your career. It's so exciting.
Thank you so much for having me, Allison. This has been a treat. It's so nice to get to chat with you.
Yes, my absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to this interview. If you liked it, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, tell me your favorite part down below in the comments. I love to hear what resonated with you, and I'll see you in the next interview.